Yesterday, my alma mater, Harvard, sued the United States government because they don't want the federal government to stop any of the $9 billion the federal government is sending it. Now, I want to begin with just a brief tutorial. The 1964 Civil Rights Act contains within it various sections, titles. Title 6 of the Act reads, "No person in the United States shall, on the grounds of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, or be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance." So, what Harvard has done over the course of the past many years is discriminate on the basis of race. The Supreme Court found as much in the June 2023 decision in Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard. Then, after 10-7, anti-Semitism broke out and indeed engulfed the entire university. And we saw it with our own eyes. And indeed, on March 31st of this year, the president of Harvard University, Neil Garber, sent a letter to everyone, somewhat pompously titled Our Resolve, which says, we really mean it. We're going to end it. We're really going to stop this. We're not going to have any more anti-Semitism. It goes on for about a page and a half. Well, the Trump administration does not trust Harvard. Indeed, the Supreme Court didn't trust Harvard. In the Students for Fair Admissions case last June, the Chief Justice wrote the majority opinion finding that Harvard had violated the Equal Protection Clause and, by extension, Title VI. I quote from the Supreme Court opinion, "The university's main response to these criticisms is essentially trust us." That's what they're doing again, trust us. And I read part of the complaint, and Harvard argues the grants that are being cut off has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. That is not the point. The point is, if you are systemically flawed on matters of Title VI jurisdiction, the federal government ought not to give you any money. And indeed, I want to go further, they had to take your tax exemption away. Now, Secretary of Education Linda McMahon was on CNBC's Squawk Box this morning and just made it abundantly clear Donald Trump is not messing around here. Cut number 9.
The president made it incredibly clear when he was campaigning that he was not going to stand by and watch the attacks of anti-Semitism that were going on in some of the elite colleges around the country, especially Columbia and Harvard and others. And so when the Department of Education started looking into this and talked to presidents, I talked to the president of Columbia. I've also talked to the president of Harvard and to how we could make sure that the universities were abiding by the law. And I made it very clear. I said, these are not First Amendment infractions. This is civil rights. This is making sure that students on all campuses can come and learn and be safe. And that is exactly what the president's direction to me is. And that is why we have had these funds either withheld or frozen during the period of time of negotiation. And we remain very open to continue talking to Harvard. But they have answered by filing a lawsuit on First Amendment rights. So I want to make it very clear, this is not a First Amendment lawsuit. This is about civil rights.
Good for you, Secretary McMahon. Now, I was on with Sean Hannity last night and the great Alan Dershowitz. And Dersh did most of the talking, which is just great because I spent 4 years at Harvard. He spent 50. So I'll let him do the talking about Harvard. And I got my licks in, though. Sean turned to me, cut number 14.
Let me go to the other side of the question. A lot of these colleges have been granted tax-exempt status by the IRS because of their, quote, educational mission. I would say indoctrination mission. But especially these elite universities, they have these massive endowments. If we're going to invest in post-high school education for kids, wouldn't we be better off supporting universities that stick to the basics, reading, writing, math, science, history, professions, trade schools, et cetera? Well, why are we giving it to universities that have these massive $53 billion endowments?
Well, Sean, good to be with you. I'm open to Harvard making a case for a unique division of labor into research that no one else is doing. I'm not open, though, to the tax-exempt status for a university that is discriminating on the basis of race or ethnicity or country of origin. I don't know what Harvard is trying to hide by virtue of the lawsuit that they filed today. It seems to me to be the best defense is a good offense. Instead of sitting down and explaining to the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education or the Division of Civil Rights at the Department of Justice why what they have been doing is not, in fact, a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. I think it is. I think we have seen with our own eyes the evidence of anti-Semitism on the campus. 2 years ago, I'm sure Professor Dershowitz knows this as well as anybody, 2 years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that Harvard was guilty of racial discrimination that violated the Equal Protection Act. They said so. That was about 4 months before 10/7 happened. So right on top of discriminating against Asian Americans begins a pattern of anti-Semitic intimidation, outright violence, the sort of thing that gets a tax-exempt status pulled. And I'd add one more thing, Sean. The provost of Harvard, the number 2 guy, he was in the Reagan Department of Justice. We didn't overlap, but we were both in the Reagan Department of Justice. We all know what the Bob Jones University case stood for. It stood for the simple proposition, if you engage in racial discrimination or discrimination against protected groups, you lose your tax-exempt status. So not only should they not get money if they're doing this, they should lose their tax-exempt status.
All right, now that's like the death penalty for a university, but I'm for it. Dersh went on to explain the Harvard lawsuit's nonsense, and they'll lose. I agree. It's as I said to Sean, it's an example of, well, let's play offense. It's better than playing defense. And let's go on the offensive and try and make this about the First Amendment. It's not about the First Amendment. It's about the Equal Protection Clause in Title VI. Now I go back, I mentioned to Sean, the Bob Jones case. Bob Jones University is in South Carolina. It has always been a Christian university. It was fundamentalist for many, many years. I don't know what it is now. And it used to have practices that violated the Civil Rights Act on the basis of race. A ban on interracial dating, for example. And that's been long since abandoned. The school regained its tax-exempt status. But in 1982 to 3, the university had not yet made any changes. And therefore, the IRS revoked their tax-exempt status, and Bob Jones University and a small private high school sued the United States to get their tax-exempt status back. And by an 8-1 decision, the Supreme Court said, no, you don't get tax-exempt status if you discriminate on the basis of race. And Chief Justice Berger wrote that decision, and his key line is, an unbroken line of cases following Brown v. Board of Education establishes beyond a doubt this court's view that racial discrimination in education violates a most fundamental national public policy as well as the rights of individuals. And then it proceeded to uphold the IRS polling of the tax-exempt status of Bob Jones University. This is what ought to happen to Harvard. Now, there are statutes on the books that prevent presidents from directing the IRS to do that, but they certainly, the Secretary of the Treasury, can certainly direct the commissioner or acting commissioner of IRS to begin the investigation as to whether or not it ought to happen. Because we got a pattern in practice here of civil rights violation. We've got a Supreme Court decision about how their admissions was deeply, deeply biased against Asian Americans in favor of blacks and Latinos. Using race to inflict penalties or award benefits is simply unconstitutional. It's just not allowed. Or if you're not a state actor, it violates Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Covers both Harvard and the University of North Carolina got caught on the EPC. Harvard got caught on Title VI. And there's no reason that Harvard is any different from Bob Jones University. Now, you'll get pseudo-sophisticates saying, well, that's Bob Jones University, and this is Harvard, and Harvard has been around since 1636. I know all that. I went there. Love the place. It can't discriminate against Jews. It can't discriminate against Asian Americans. And until it stops and proves that it has stopped, it ought not to be tax exempt, and it ought not to get any federal money for anything. And it doesn't matter if the money is being cut off to something that's unrelated to the anti-Semitism. You don't get. Money is fungible. Money is fungible. It goes all through the university. So go to your own endowment and pay your own researchers and get right with the law, Harvard. It's not that hard. I'm so glad that Noah Rothman's mom came to his Easter dinner, because otherwise she would have had to eat lamb. She brought the ham. Now, no, I do not like lamb. I've never liked lamb. And you made 3 lambs, 3 racks of lambs. I listened to the podcast of National Review of the Editors, but your mom brought the ham, which is, I believe, actually obligatory for Catholics to eat on Easter. So thank goodness for someone with sense in their mind.
I brought the ham. I made the ham, Hugh. The ham and the lamb together. My mom made ratatouille, which was fantastic.
Okay.
I'm not trying to put her down. But yes,
but
very proud.
You
of
went a little bit overboard
lamb.
on the lamb side. Moreover, I thought as I listened today, how much time has Noah spent cooking that he could have been reading in his life? You realize this is a one-on-one trade-off. Every book you don't read, put down to cooking.
I would love to read more books, but this is a choice. You know, everything's an opportunity cost, and I do enjoy cooking as as a way to vent your frustrations that you get from all the reading. You know, there's got to be some sort of an outlet, and that's it.
Well, I was very impressed with your 3 racks of lamb simultaneously on limited burner space.
Sir.
Let me then turn to the Pope. I thought you were very judicious in not being a Catholic and not having an opinion. Garrity doesn't like the Pope, but we now know why. We've been doing our research here. And the only franchise in the NHL, NBA, NFL, and Major League Baseball that did not make postseason play during his pontificate, there was one, the New York Jets. Coincidence?
Okay. You know what?
Coincidence?
Cause. No, this is well-founded cause for Jim's frustrations with this papacy. You know, I hope, fortunately, it's behind us, and maybe the Jets will have a winning season this year as a result.
No, it's gonna take Jesus coming back before that happens, Noah. Let me go to the serious subject, Harvard. I was on Hannity last night telling Sean, I want to go full Bob Jones University on Harvard. They violated Title VI twice. They discriminated against Asian Americans for, I don't know, a decade. They top it off with 1.5 years of anti-Semitism, and then they sue Harvard saying their First Amendment rights are at issue. Nonsense. They should not get any money, and they should lose their tax-exempt status. What do you think on this?
Well, I'm not an attorney, but I do see Harvard attempting to litigate this case in public. It's attempting to throw itself on the mercy of public opinion by claiming that if its funds were taken away from it, we'd have all the research that is done by this institution would be sacrificed. A lot of advances into research in Alzheimer's and cancer, medical research in particular, to say nothing of other STEM professions, would be seriously jeopardized, and the United States would suffer as a result. That is a separate question. It might be a very serious question, but it's a separate question from the legal issue here, which is whether or not the university did engage in creedal discrimination and ethnic discrimination, which is prohibited by the Civil Rights Act, in particular Title VI. That's it. That's what we're discussing here. And any other ancillary details are irrelevant to that question. The conservative case here is pretty straightforward. Also, the right should be very, very concerned that the next administration will take this precedent and leverage it to enforce and impose its impulses, its edicts, its cultural affinities on Christian universities, on conservative cultural institutions. It's not as though Democrats haven't evinced a willingness to do that previously. Indeed, during the Obama administration, they promulgated a rule that's maintained that lawyers could sue, for example, Hillsdale University because it should be subject to the federal government's broad interventions because it is covered by the Civil Rights Act. Democrats are not above using these techniques to advantage themselves and their preferred constituents, and conservatives should be afraid of unintended consequences. That's one of conservatism's primary, paradigmatic advantages. But that's, again, beside the legal question here. The legal question is very straightforward. Did Harvard discriminate? And it does seem to.
Slippery slopeism is familiar to me. Lots of government agencies say, we can't give you a permit for this because if we did, we'll have to give a permit for that. And slippery slopeism is usually an endless series of negative possibilities. I deal with it here and now. They have got a record. The Supreme Court adjudicated bias against Asian Americans. And we have all seen with our eyes the anti-Semitism. And I wondered, did you see
President Garber's March 31st rather pompously titled letter to the university entitled Our Resolve?
I did, but I did not read it. I only saw it. Came across my transom.
It is pompous beyond all belief, but it's about how we're still working on the anti-Semitism. We commit to you this, we commit to you that. I don't believe them, Noah. Is there any reason we should believe them?
We should believe that these university presidents do not want to set their institutions on fire. I don't think that serves their interests. We should believe that there are elements within these administrations, I'm thinking of Columbia more than Harvard, that believe they are captured by elements with whom they are surrounded, particularly in the humanities department, non-faculty administrators, that are beholden to a worldview that is hostile to American values, as defined by the Trump administration and to which I subscribe. And we should believe that they would kind of want help out of the trap that they've set for themselves. I think that's true. What we should not believe is that they are capable of implementing the kind of reforms that are absolutely necessary to safeguard the rights of all Americans. They've given us no indication that they are capable of doing that. They do sometimes give us lip service that they want to do that sort of thing. But it's pretty plain at this point that there needs to be some sort of outside intervention to impose the kind of sobriety that prudent elements within these administrations want but cannot secure for themselves or their students. I think that's about as much
you're right.
as I'm willing to give them.
You are right. Now, is it fair for me to hold up as a parallel not only the Bob Jones University case, but every consent decree over every segregated school system that was slow in desegregating and needed federal court supervision? I think they're exactly on point. What do you think?
I mean, that is a legal question that I don't feel qualified to adjudicate or judge. I will defer to you on that one. And I am very concerned about the prospect for reciprocity from Democrats when they regain power, because Democrats won't be out of power forever. But
no,
again,
they're not out of power now. I think they're running the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education right now.
It's entirely possible, but we could very well get a much more activist Democratic administration. I would not want to bequeath to President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez powers she does not have now. That's something that we should all be concerned about.
Are you trying to get people to drive off the road, Noah?
Listen, think of the worst case scenario, and then do not fashion new weapons in the culture war that you will hand over to your enemies. That is
that's what Mitch McConnell told Harry Reid. But there's at some point you got to rest on the Constitution and trust the free exercise clause to stop the leftist march. And I know the slippery slope, but AOC, by the way, is the front runner. We have 30 seconds. I think she's the front runner. Do you think she's the front runner?
I think she might be. She's not to be underestimated as a political actor. She's got her finger on the pulse, especially of Democratic politics. But she's not to be overestimated because she seems only to have her finger on the pulse of Democratic politics. She's very capable of securing the nomination for herself. I do think so. And I think if she were to spend 6 years in the Senate taking out Chuck Schumer, she would be an unstoppable political force. But I do think she's pretty green and has not demonstrated an ability to speak to Americans outside the far left progressive faction.
She did raise $9.6 million in the first quarter this year. I point out Chris Van Hollen is starting from behind, so he had to go to El Salvador to get a head start on her. Noah C. Rothman, lamb expert, but he brought the ham. Thank you, Noah. Coming up today, Steve Hilton's going to join me. He had a massive crowd earlier today in Huntington Beach, California, as he announced his campaign for governor. Looking forward to talking to Steve Hilton. He's running as a Republican, uphill race in California, like the implacable hill, which I always talk to you about, but we'll talk to Steve about that. I do want to remind you, I have become a consumer cellular user. You too can switch to consumer cellular. It's remarkably easy. All you have to do is call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Now, they have a wide range of plans and products. You can keep your old phone number. You can get all your data transferred. Or you can start over if you want. And you can go unlimited data, great inexpensive plan, 2 lines, unlimited data on both, $60 a month. Or if you're over 50 and you just realize I don't use much data, I don't even understand how much data I use. Will they talk to me about what plan I should have? The answer is yes. You call 1-800-411-4454. You'll get a menu, and very, very quickly you're connected with a live human being who is here in America that will talk you through everything. They have wonderful service, wonderful quality. Whatever you're used to now, you'll get the same quality. And I just want you to know, the second phone option, which I have, is not for everyone. But you know what is for everyone? Saving money. No matter what age you are, but especially if you're retired, you really can't be throwing money away on big cellular. And they want to sell. They even want to sell, Granny in the rest home who has trouble doing FaceTime once a month. They want to sell Granny a big cellular says, you need unlimited data, Granny. No, she doesn't. She needs the 8 gig, really cheap plan that Consumer Cellular offers. But call for details, 1-800-411-4454, or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Savings without sacrifice is Consumer Cellular. That's what it's all about. What Dwayne's all about is sabotaging me. And this, I think, is now I've figured it out. Because ever since he went on myPhDweightloss.com 2.5 years ago, he's been really grumpy. And part of that evidenced itself today. I was on Sean Hannity last night. I told him as I was leaving the studio yesterday, make sure you pick up the Hannity clip. And the Hannity clip was not on my run sheet today.
Yes.
In fact, I didn't even have a run sheet today. I had asked for the run sheet today, and I had to ask. So I am just curious.
Yes.
Do you think this might have something to do with your losing 50 pounds on myPhDweightloss.com?
What, me creating fake news?
Yeah, 864
644
1900.
That's 864
644
1900.
I'm glad to have the admission on tape that you create fake news.
No, the accusation that I
No, you just said me creating fake news. Everyone heard that.
You just said me creating fake news.
Did you make up the jet stat that I wantonly used with Noah?
No, Harley did.
Oh, you're blaming Harley.
Yeah, that's how it rolls here.
Everything rolls around here.
That's how everything rolls here. Low man on the
Should
pole,
we blame
right?
James, who was here yesterday, our future intern?
If he were here today, he'd get the blame.
Well, we can blame him anyway. It is a future intern. We're bringing back interns.
Yes, we are. At least one.
One.
Yes.
Do you think you saw him screen? Was he in shock after he talked to a couple of the drunks and wackos who called?
I told him to take the next call, and I said, "I promise you'll mess it up the first time," and of course he did.
Well, did he cut him off?
No, he actually cut off the person you were talking to on the air.
Oh, he did?
And I saved it before it went away.
Well, everyone makes that mistake.
Oh, of course they do.
Everybody does.
Yes.
Call screening. And Dwayne hadn't done it right anyway. And by the way, ever since he got skinny fingers, they slip too. Since he lost 50 pounds. 864
644
1900.
This one doesn't slip.
Which one is that? You can't. The international sign for water.
Yeah.
You cannot put that on the video.
I didn't put it on the video.
You can't do that.
It didn't slip.
MyPhDweightloss.com. 864
644
1900. Let me play for you a little bit of J.D. Vance. Actually, I don't have enough time to do J.D. Vance. Let me play a little bit of Carolyn Levitt, cut number 6.
Response to Harvard's lawsuit.
Sure. Well, the president has made it quite clear that it's Harvard who has put themselves in the position to lose their own funding by not obeying federal law. And we expect all colleges and universities who are receiving taxpayer funds to abide by federal law. It's quite simple. And the president made it clear he's not going to tolerate violations of federal law. He's not going to tolerate illegal harassment and violence towards Jewish American students or students of any faith on our campuses across the country.
Bravo, Carolyn. Throw in the fact that they've been adjudicated to have been discriminating against Asian Americans for many years. And you've got goodbye, tax-exempt status, Harvard. There was an oral argument today before the United States Supreme Court in the case of Mahmoud versus Taylor. It involves Montgomery County, Maryland, and their wacky left-wing lunatic school district trying to indoctrinate students and parents fighting back. Eric Baxter is counsel for the parents who are suing Montgomery County schools. And Justice Kavanaugh asked him to explain. I think this is very helpful since now oral arguments are becoming quite readily accessible and usable by people. Cut number 11. This is Eric Baxter at the SCOTUS today.
And then I guess I am a bit mystified as a lifelong resident of the county, how it came to this. Can you just tell us what happened when in March of 23, you know, what happened in terms of the objections and how the school board responded, to give us a little bit?
Well, I share your concern. My kids graduated, two of my kids graduated from MoCo and were opted out when they asked on their own accord to opt out of some instruction on sex education. And what happened is, we're not even entirely sure, because for the entire first year, the board promised in multiple places on Fox News and other media that parents would be notified and then they would be opted out. The last notice happened on March 22nd, 2023. The very next day, overnight, with no explanation, the board came out and said, we're changing the rule because we want all students to be instructed on inclusivity. That's at 547 in the appendix. That emphasis on all students have to receive this instruction. Nothing about administrability. And then
now, I will come back to this, but David Drucker is deigned to join us. David, you don't live in Montgomery County, do you?
Nope.
So what do you make?
I live in Washington.
Okay, so what do you make of this? This Supreme Court case has got quite a lot of attention today on whether or not public schools can force feed ideology into classrooms.
Well, listen, Hugh, I mean, this has been like a major sort of societal battle and something we've been talking about really for decades. I think, you know, because of the pandemic,
okay, thank you so much.
It was magnified because parents started paying so much more attention to their public schools. And because in the aftermath of the pandemic, so many of the public schools seemed to get more aggressive in how they decided to socialize, if you will, their students. And so I just think this is a much bigger deal than it used to be, but it's not a new deal.
Do you expect, I think this is a slam dunk winner. I think that the parents are going to be allowed to opt their children out. I don't even think it's close. Do you think it's close?
Well, I hate to try to read court tea leaves because I'm not that good at that, but it strikes me as the kind of thing that this court would do.
You're also not good at driving and holding the phone at the same time. That's a new trick.
My wife is driving. So
all right. So I'm glad. I'm actually relieved to hear that. My next question for you is: do you think Harvard wins, loses, or draws in its lawsuit against the Trump administration?
I think actually Harvard might have a good chance here. I mean, the administration is trying. I mean, basically, it wants to take over the school. And, you know, I wonder if enough justices are going to find that palatable.
David, I don't agree with that, but everyone gets their own opinion until the court ruled. The court ruled against Harvard 2 years ago that they were discriminating on the basis of race. Harvard has admitted to anti-Semitism on March 31st at length in a letter called Our Resolve by Neil Garber. You're not entitled to federal money.
I agree you're not entitled to federal money. So I guess, the issue could come down to, if you want to take the money, you have to follow instructions. And I don't like arguing legal theory with you because you're better at that than I am. I'm pretty decent on the campaign trail. But I do think the executive branch is being rather expansive with its powers. And so listen, we'll see what the court thinks about that.
Title VI is at issue here. We'll come back to that. Let's go to politics then. Steve Hilton is coming up next hour. He was in Huntington Beach today. He's declared for the governorship in California. He's a Republican. People know him on Fox News. Huge crowd in Huntington Beach. But as we know, Huntington Beach is not exactly norm for California. It's deep red in a world of deep blue. What do you think Hilton's chances are?
Well, listen, I mean, I'd like to see some polling. I'd like to see, where things are a year from now. Keep in mind that in deep blue states and deep red states, there are always what I like to refer to as expats who are really patriotic about their team and the idea that they've got some representation. And so, just like AOC and Bernie Sanders were able to get thousands to turn out in Idaho to see them, I mean, Democrats aren't winning anything in that state, for quite some time, no matter what the political environment is. But they're still in a state with millions of people, thousands of Democrats, and likewise with California, just the other way around.
So do you agree with me? I just discussed this with Noah Rothman. AOC is the front runner for the Democrats in 2028.
No, I don't agree with that, but I don't disagree with it. I mean, right now she's a major figure that's garnering a lot of attention. She, gives Democratic activists and progressives the warm and fuzzies. But, we've seen with political parties, they often end up choosing who they feel is the more pragmatic candidate on both sides of the aisle. I mean, 2024, Democrats were in a bind. But if you look at 20, they went with Biden rather than all of the progressives. In 2016, Republicans went with Trump in part because Republican primary voters thought he was the most pragmatic ideologically. And I could, and so on down the line as we look backward into history. So I actually don't look at AOC as a front runner, but certainly a front runner as a party influencer. And that's going to be very interesting if you do have a pragmatic Democratic nominee. Are they going to actually act pragmatic and be willing to tell the Democratic base, yeah, we don't win your way, but we can win my way?
$9.6 million, she raised that. And I point to the fact that after a tough loss in 68, Democrats went left in 72 with George McGovern. After a tough loss in 80, Democrats went left with Walter Mondale, promising to raise everyone's taxes. Tough loss in 24. If they go left, I mean, we got 30 seconds. Isn't that why Van Hollen's down in El Salvador? Just trying to, throw out a virtue signal flag that he can be as left-wing as AOC?
I think he's down in El Salvador because Democrats have issues with how Trump has handled this issue, and the guy is a constituent, theoretically.
A constituent. Oh, you're being generous, David M. Drucker. Now you get to join your wife in whatever it is that you're doing. I bet you were going through the drive-through line. Go get your food. David M. Drucker, good to see you. Follow him on X at David M. Drucker from the Dispatch. Today in the Supreme Court, the justices heard challenges to a Montgomery County public education policy indoctrinating children into the flavor of the month when it comes to intimacy. Brett Kavanaugh said this, Justice Kavanaugh, cut number 12.
In the country has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The county has opt-outs for all sorts of things. The other Maryland counties have opt-outs for all sorts of things. And yet for this one thing, they changed in mid-year and say no more opt-outs. I'm just not understanding feasibility.
So again, I think what's in the record is that with respect to these books as they were deployed in the classroom, there was high absenteeism in some schools. For example, dozens of students being opted out in, I think Mr. Baxter said the average size of an elementary school in Montgomery County is 700 students. So each grade is 125. If you have dozens of students walking out, making arrangements for those students to have adequate space and supervision and alternative instruction, I think is infeasible.
But they do it for all sorts of other opt-outs.
They don't do it for all sorts of other opt-outs. There's a limited universe of things that students can opt out from. The Family Life and Healthy Sexuality curriculum stands alone. It is mandated by the state. It is something where you are able to predict precisely when the curriculum is going to be deployed. There's
It's the most similar substantively to what we have here, and there's an opt-out allowed there. I guess I'm not understanding why Montgomery County School Board stands alone. I think in the country, you can tell me if there's another school board that's done something like this.
I apologize.
Both the kind of books that are being used and prohibiting opt-outs. And I guess I'm just not understanding the whole goal, I think, of some of our religion precedents is to look for the win-win, to look for the situation where you can respect the religious beliefs and accommodate the religious beliefs while the state or city or whatever it may be can pursue its goals. And here, they're not asking you to change what's taught in the classroom. They're not asking you to change that at all. A lot of the rhetoric suggests that they might have, that they were trying to do that, but that's not what they're trying to do. They're only
Oh my goodness, Montgomery County, you'd better settle. You're going to lose. Brett Baer, host of Special Report every night at 6 p.m. on the Fox News Channel. America's newsman now, given the ratings. Brett, welcome. I don't want to begin with the news because I know that you try to get to Augusta often. Were you there for Sunday's showdown at the end?
I wasn't. I was there Saturday with my family.
Okay. What did you make of that? That's up there with Larry Mize chipping in.
It really was. It was emotional. Boy, I mean, going back and forth and back and forth. You know, I'm friends with Jim Nance, and he called me, and I'd left him a few messages after how great they did, I thought, the broadcast. And he called me on Tuesday and said he was just getting his head around, you know, the emotional up and down. And it really was. It was really quite
I hadn't even thought about the call of the match. That does stretch you. That's pretty remarkable. You used to play competitive golf. Did you ever go to a 4-hole playoff?
No, we used to have sudden death in college, and yeah, I went to playoffs, but never like that.
That was something else. All right, Brett, I want to turn to three stories: Harvard, Chris Van Hollen, and then the new decision by the California legislature to move forward a piece of new legislation that will allow college students to sleep in their cars in the parking lots. I want to start with Harvard. Do you think Harvard is serious about this lawsuit, or is the best defense a good offense going on here?
I think this is more about, pushing back on the Trump administration and standing up and hoping that there's some back down or let up. And the politics of it. I'm not sure, the legal standing. I know they have very good lawyers there, but it seems like it's more about standing up and making a political stand.
Have you ever invited Harvard President Garber to be on Special Report with you?
I have not. I had Larry Summers on when he was Harvard president, but I haven't. I should.
I hope you do that, because I would like to see him in a neutral setting just try and explain this, because I am befuddled by their choices. Like, I'm befuddled by Senator Van Hollen. Now, I doubt very much he's reached out to you. Have you reached out to him?
We Shannon Bream had him on Fox News Sunday, and we were going to have him on, and she had booked him on that Sunday. So, obviously we covered all aspects of his trip and took the news conference.
So, what do you think he's doing?
Well, again, I think this is about making a stand, getting media attention, talking ad nauseum about due process, but wrapping their hands around, a guy that definitely raises questions, if not causes major problems in the person.
Does Chris Van Hollen have ambitions to be the nominee in 2028? Otherwise, I don't understand this. I do if he's intending to try and jostle AOC to the side and get in there with Bernie and the others on the left. Does he have that sort of ambition?
I think he has higher ambitions, yes. I don't know if it's this time, but yeah. I mean, he wrangles Republicans and comes on common ground. He stakes out some positions on the left side, but sometimes he's working across the aisle with Republicans. Yeah, I think he's trying to make a case that he's a national Democratic figure. I'm just not sure that this is the hill to die on.
No, neither am I. In 1968, Democrats lost a tough one, so they went to McGovern. In 72, they went left. 1980, they lost a tough one. 84, they go left with Walter Mondale. I'm going to raise your taxes. The other guy won't tell you that. Do you think the Democrats are doing that, having lost a tough one in 2028, that they threw everything at? They're just going to go left with the guy who comes on your show that I like a lot is Ro Khanna, comes on my show as well. But AOC, Bernie, Chris Van Hollen, these are not mainstream Democrats. These are Democrats of the left.
Yeah, I think, it's too early to say that. I think they're getting a lot of attention, a lot of oxygen, because the excitement always is on the far side of either party at the beginning. But as you know, you got to motivate the independents in the middle eventually. And I don't think that those potential candidates have surfaced as of yet.
All right. Now, Brett, out here in California, Steve Hilton will be coming on next hour. He announced for governor today. I know you know Steve. And he had an enormous crowd in Huntington Beach, just enormous. Sort of the counter-revolutionary crowd showed up. But at the same time, California looks poised to pass a new law that will allow students to sleep in their cars if they're enrolled at the community college. I don't see California ever coming back to the norm. You've been out here enough. You've done a lot of book events at the Reagan Library, at the Nixon Library, up and down the state. Do you think it's ever going to come back to the norm?
Listen, I do think that you look at the Wilsons and the Schwarzeneggers and others who over the years have broken through. And I think that there is this frustration, obviously, among Republicans, independents, even some Democrats, about how things operate out there. You know, the reaction to the fires, I think, was a game changer. And, you know, what happened in L.A. and how the state dealt with it, I think it may have shifted the dynamic. Can Steve Hilton tap into that and that frustration? Maybe. It's still a long shot in California, but Republicans have broken through.
Yeah, I will ask him next hour, and I want to close by asking you about Steve Witkoff going to Oman. He was with Putin last week. There's a Financial Times story this afternoon that Putin has offered to freeze the lines where they are. Who knows what Mr. Witkoff is up to? Do you have a lot of hope for these conversations with Iran? I do not. I'm very skeptical, but what do you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty skeptical, too. I do know that Iran knows how close it came to the Trump administration giving Bibi Netanyahu kind of the green light or the yellow light to do what he needed to do. And I think they're still on the cusp of that. So that's the only hope, is that ominous deadline hangs in the balance on the other side of whatever happens.
And President Trump talked today with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and afterwards, the only readout we got is, I'm 100% with Israel on every issue. I don't know how to read that other than the bombs will fly if they don't throw the doors open real quick.
I think that was the signal to Iran. You know, like, I'm with Bibi on everything, including that, if this doesn't get done. But I agree with you. Iran is slippery.
I will be watching tonight on Special Report, see how you cover that. Brett Baer, thank you. Follow him on X at Brett Baer. Follow Special Report at Special Report on X as well. There's been a terrorist attack in India, by the way, in Kashmir. 20 tourists were targeted by terrorists and are feared dead. That has never happened before in the Kashmir territory and the other territory of Jammu. Been long disputed between Pakistan and India. Been violence there for a long, long time, but it's never come to this before. President Trump posting on X his sympathy for everyone. Great Britain has passed a new law to protect children from social media sites. They're going to be under an obligation now to affirmatively take action to prevent children from accessing adult content. And that's great. That would not violate our First Amendment, by the way. It's called the Online Safety Act. Meta doesn't like it. X doesn't like it. But I don't think that's a trade issue for the United States, as some people are suggesting, because it's just not. Then finally, we've got Florida condo owners are so desperate to sell in the Wall Street Journal. And that reminds me, andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172. They're our great sponsor. They're home lenders. They lend you money. And I'm going to have breakfast tomorrow with Andrew, as a matter of fact, catch up on what this crazy market has meant for mortgages. But when I read a story like this, why Florida condo owners are so desperate to sell, that's, to me, a buy signal to people who want to go to Florida. Because that means, if it's made it to the news, that means the dip in condo prices has reached its nadir. That all of a sudden people are trying to unload their condos. They don't like the special assessments. They didn't like the insurance rate hikes. They were afraid of hurricanes, whatever. They decided that good old Florida is not for them. And the story begins with a New York couple that moved to Florida a few years ago, and they loved their condo, and they're making money on their condo. They're going to make 40 grand on their condo, but the condo fees have gone up. Well, that means the market is right where you want to be if you're a buyer. So maybe you put off moving. Time to call andrewandtodd.com. 888-888-1172. You can afford a lot of condo fees if you're not paying California property taxes and California sale taxes and California income tax. So you can go from California to Florida and save an enormous amount of money. But if you want to do that, call Andrew and Todd, andrewandtodd.com. They're a Sierra Pacific Mortgage. They're a banker. They lend you the money. 888-888-1172.
888-1172, andrewandtodd.com. If you got to move with the professional, get pre-approved, and go shopping. andrewandtodd.com. Missing Dennis Prager, many of you are. Go to Pragertopia, get your daily dose of Dennis till he comes back, we hope, in June. For example,
Paul Johnson, one of the absolute eminent thinkers.
We discover young people today don't know enough about George Washington. And we think the reason is that the books about Washington are so long. Do you think you could do George Washington in 40,000 words? So I agreed to do it, and I did it.
Yeah, there is so much on Pragertopia. I didn't know that Paul Johnson had sat down with Dennis until I heard that clip. There's just so much at Pragertopia. So you're missing Dennis, go and become a member of that. I want to go back to the Supreme Court argument today in Mahmoud versus Taylor, because this is Montgomery County, one of the most, if not the most liberal jurisdiction in the United States, obliging elementary school kids to be indoctrinated in left-wing ideology concerning sexuality. And a lot of parents opted out, and that was fine for a long time. Then Montgomery County said, no more opt-outs, and that led to this litigation. Justice Brown Jackson has this exchange with the counsel for the parents, Mr. Eric Baxter. This is Justice Brown Jackson, Eric Baxter, cut number 13.
But I need you to focus on my question. This is a preliminary injunction. I appreciate that. When you seek a preliminary injunction, you actually have to have a factual record that is the basis for the court to make a determination in your favor that some conduct that you're complaining about needs to be enjoined. And what's confusing to me and hard, really hard in this situation is that we have a lot of sincerely held beliefs and concerns and children and principles, and I see all of those things, and so really want to be careful about making the pronouncement that relates to this. I don't understand how we can do it on this record because we can't know. We don't at this moment, based on the record you've provided, know that these books aren't just sitting on the shelves. And you've said that if that's the case, that's not going to be enough.
I disagree, Your Honor. The record is undisputed. And I, again, will refer you to the district court transcript at 63, where counsel
So you're
said
saying the Fourth Circuit is wrong when it says, quote, we don't have any information about how any teacher or school employee has actually used any of the books.
The Court of Appeals did not dispute that some of the books have to be used, and we have all of the teachers' instruction that the board's not disputed.
I understand that, but the Fourth Circuit made a ruling that we don't know, quote, what any child has been taught in conjunction with their use. So are you saying that you do have affidavits and information about teachers in the classroom and what they've taught children of different ages about these books?
Yes, we do. All of our clients have, in their declarations, they describe which books were going to be read to their children.
Were the clients in the classroom?
They were not in the classroom, but they know. And again, we don't have to wait until the injury has happened to get relief. The point of a preliminary injunction is that we can, when the injury is imminent, we can seek relief.
All right,
to
let me
stop
ask
it from
you
happening
another.
before our children's innocence is destroyed.
Let me ask you another series of questions because I'm just trying to understand the.
Maybe I don't want to go down that direction because you happen to have the transcript and the affidavits, and I don't want you to read that into the record. Here's what I think about Justice Brown Jackson. I think she has terrible clerks. I really do. I've heard a number of these arguments now, and she makes mistakes like this one. There's no evidence in the record. Well, there is evidence in the record. And the Fourth Circuit held, no, the Fourth Circuit held this. And this is really hard. Declarations about being really hard. If you don't like to do really hard cases, don't join the Supreme Court, because the only cases that get to the Supreme Court are the really hard ones. But I go back to Eric Baxter outlining for Justice Kavanaugh what's going on in this jurisdiction, cut number 11.
And then I guess I am a bit mystified as a lifelong resident of the county, how it came to this. Can you just tell us what happened when in March of 23, you know, what happened in terms of the objections and how the school board responded, to give us a little bit?
Well, I share your concern. My kids graduated, two of my kids graduated from MoCo and were opted out when they asked on their own accord to opt out of some instruction on sex education. And what happened is We're not even entirely sure because for the entire first year, the board promised in multiple places on Fox News and other media that parents would be notified and then they would be opted out. The last notice happened on March 22nd, 2023. The very next day, overnight, with no explanation, the board came out and said, we're changing the rule because we want all students to be instructed on inclusivity. That's at 547 in the appendix. That emphasis on all students have to receive this instruction. Nothing about administrability. And then from there on, even then they said, if we've already told you you can opt out, we'll let you do that, but more parents can't ask. And then it wasn't until later in the year when they actually revised their guidelines, which still allow certain religious opt-outs and just not others. So this was clearly targeted at religious parents objecting.
But then complaints were raised, right?
That's right. Hundreds of parents complained. These were mostly, according to news articles, mostly families from Muslim faith and Ethiopian Orthodox who were objecting when they spoke to the board. The board accused them of using their religious beliefs as another reason to hate, accused a young Muslim girl of parroting her parents' dogma, and then accused the parents of aligning with racist xenophobes and white supremacists. And so, again, there's no question in this case that there is a burden, that it was imposed with animosity, and that it's discriminating against our clients because of their religious beliefs.
What's amazing is I teach every year Wisconsin v. Yoder, and the Amish won in 1972, right? The Amish didn't want their kids to go to school after 8th grade, and Wisconsin wanted the kids to go to school, mandated going to school until 12th grade. And Chief Justice Berger wrote for the court, nah, they don't have to go to school. Those are sincerely held religious belief, the Amish religion. They don't really need grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. They're farmers. And they get to opt out. So I don't know what Montgomery County is thinking other than they want to get slapped around and they're virtue signaling again. Let me do the market report brought to you by our wonderful sponsor, AmericanFederal.com. I haven't even tried to get Nick Grovich to tell me what's going on because it's been madness, I'm sure. Gold today closed down a little bit at $3,394 an ounce, down 0.9%. $3,394 an ounce. It was at $3,500 an ounce last evening, when I checked first to see that the Guardians had indeed beaten the Yankees. And then I checked to make sure that what was gold doing, because it's been so crazy. It had gone to $3,500, and I said, what in the world? So it eased off a little bit to $3,394, and the other indexes were all up. So Dow was up 2.66%, the S&P was up 2.5%, the NASDAQ was up 2.71%. American Federal, like me, believes in a plan, not impulse buying. Don't run off and sell everything at once or buy everything at once. Don't be that person. Talk to Nick and develop a plan about whether you're going to buy or sell gold or other special metals. Nick will talk to you for a long time. He does big transactions. He does small transactions. He charges a commission. It's very transparent whether he's buying or selling gold. You have to call Nick at 800-221-7694. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, the number's right there, 1-800-221-7694. Or you can go to AmericanFederal.com. That's also pretty easy to remember, AmericanFederal.com, or 800-221-7694. One of the things I like to do is to recognize great talent in the broadcast space. And I turn off politics when I'm done. So I taught yesterday. I did the show, taught. Then I did a hit on Sean Hannity's show. And then all I wanted to do was listen to the Wine and Gold podcast. Because on Sunday, the Cavaliers beat the Heat 121-100. And I was looking at the stat line, didn't see the game, and was looking at the stat line. We had Easter dinner, so I wasn't able to watch the game. Must have Easter dinner. And was watching the stat line, a little bit worried about Evan Mobley only having 7 rebounds. But Ty Jerome shot 28, Darius Garland had 29, and Donovan Mitchell had 30, so you really can't be too worried about it. So I go to the Wine and Gold podcast, and that's Ethan Sand and Chris Fedor, usually. But they've bulked up for the playoffs. They had a Jimmy Watkins and Ashley Bastock. These are 4 superb sports reporters for Cleveland.com. And I think they're worried about Chris Bolton for ESPN or something because he's so wildly knowledgeable about the NBA because they've started working Ashley, who's good on all sports. And Jimmy Watkins, a genius. That kid's going to be around forever. And Ethan does basketball podcasts all the time, and they're always funny. He's always stat-driven. And for people like me who watch basketball but don't understand it, they don't get too up there in the clouds. I know what a pick and roll is, but don't get too more complicated than telling me they're in the zone in Miami and that they lost Jimmy Butler. Just tell me what happened and explain it for the guy who watches hoops but doesn't live the stat sheet. And at the end of it, an hour and about 10 minutes long, I said, that was superb. That was funny. Look, it's PG-13. Don't be confused. Not R, but it's PG-13. I want to warn you. Chris gets a little loose sometimes and funny, and Ashley gets funny, and Jimmy just always is funny, and Ethan moves it along. But I marvel at the ability of people to develop broadcast chops who are hired to be writers. All right, so most of these people are beat writers, and then they get Dave Campbell's the brilliant editor of Cleveland.com Sports, and he says, we need a lot of podcasts. We keep our newspaper alive. It was a newspaper. It was the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Now it's Cleveland.com. We keep it alive by people who are listening to Buckeye Talk, Orange and Brown Talk, Wine and Gold Talk. That's what keeps us alive. People subscribe for the text. They have a subtext like I have a subtext at the Universe, and they answer questions and they cover it. And the NBA is a lot of games. It's a lot of games, a lot of podcasting, and they're usually working late. But I listen to this at the end of a day of politics, 3 hours, teach for 2 hours, do Sean's show, and it's 6-7 hours of politics, and you throw in prep and everything. All I want to do is just relax a little bit. And I'm laughing on the drive back from the hit home, laughing out loud at this podcast and at the same time understanding. So then I turned over, I said, okay, I want to hear what are they doing over at the Miami Heat podcast. So I went to find a Miami Heat podcast, and it's called Five on the Floor. And they are awful. It's just an awful podcast. And I don't know if it's because they lost or it's because the Heat are terrible and they're not used to being terrible, but I don't know. But the difference between a great podcast on the same basketball game and a terrible podcast on the same basketball game is enormous. So I want to take my hat off and just say to Ethan and Chris and Jimmy and Ashley, well done. Now, those of you who like hoops, go look up Wine and Gold podcast. Go look it up. Now, I get to listen to Terry's talking, and Terry's forgot more about basketball and baseball. He says he doesn't like to talk football, and then he tells us, the number of catches that Travis Hunter had and the number of drops. So, yeah, Terry, tell me about it. That's what I like. I like to go to sport, and I appreciate Terry talking and everybody else, but I really do want people to understand there is a world now of broadcast. I have my own podcast, The Universe. Dwayne has Dwayne's World. Those are political podcasts, right? But there's a world of everything. I'm sure there are cooking podcasts. I'm sure there are, you name it, there are podcasts on it. But if you want great hoops, Wine and Gold podcast, because I think the Cavs are built for June. And I think Ty Jerome's had more fun than anyone I've ever seen have fun playing basketball. And go Cavs. I'll let them know. Now comes about 15 minutes of my favorite time of the week. I talked to Byron York, chief political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, Fox News contributor. Byron, I'm going to say a word and just have you respond. Harvard.
Well, the first response was laughter. Well, what can I... Out of touch.
That's charitable. That's very charitable. I went on Hannity's show last night with Sean, and I said, not only are they going to lose this lawsuit, which Dershowitz agreed with me, so that's always comforting, but they're not going to get the money back, and they ought to lose their tax-exempt status. And
I may have stunned people. I'm just had it. It's my alma mater. I love the place, but they're so deep in their own stuff, Byron. Do they not see how they look to people?
No, I don't think they do. Well, they don't call it an ivory tower for nothing. They are somewhat isolated, and they are somewhat out of touch. On the other hand, they're extremely wealthy. What is their, is it $53 billion? What's their endowment? $53 billion is their endowment. So with the income of that and $53 billion, I mean, they could operate. What's their annual budget?
I have no idea.
I have no idea either, but they could probably get along for a while. And, I mean, they're so rich that I think it's been common to refer to them at times as a hedge fund with a university attached.
Yep.
So why can't they keep doing that? And the other thing, I have one question for you. Maybe you know the answer. As part of their PR response in this whole battle with the Trump administration, Harvard has emphasized, as a matter of fact, emphasized to the exclusion of everything else, the research it does in medicine and science. Okay, so we do all this really valuable stuff, and you really don't want to stop funding that because we're saving lives and making a better future. Is that all they do? Don't they have like a humanities department, and don't they have a social sciences, and don't they have lots of things that do?
Oh, they got a
really
department. They got a school
stuff?
of education. They got a school of public policy. They got a school of health. They got all sorts of schools. It's a gigantinormous place.
And they are acting as if they are a medical research institution that the Trump administration is strangling, when in fact they are a heavily politicized educational institution.
And I don't think there's an answer to that, nor is there an answer to the very simple question, if you're doing all this medical research and you were segregated, would that be okay? Because that's their argument, basically, is we are above and beyond the civil rights laws of the United States. You must give us our money because we're doing important research. And I actually haven't heard that argument since 1984, when I joined the Department of Justice in the aftermath of the Bob Jones decision coming down. And Bob Jones is this little Southern school that was segregationist, and then it got out of segregation, but they still banned interracial dating, and they lost their tax-exempt status. And it shattered the Reagan DOJ because a lot of people thought they had the religious right to be that wrong, and other people said, no, they don't. And the Supreme Court agreed, no, they don't. Has anyone brought up the Bob Jones case? You don't get to violate the civil rights laws of the United States and be a tax-exempt institution.
Yeah, I believe you and I actually talked about Bob Jones last week, as a matter of fact, because I believe the IRS, kind of similar to this, the IRS withdrew their tax-exempt status, and then they sued, and it got to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court sides with the IRS, so it's pretty clear what was going on, and it happened in a way roughly similar, at least chronologically, in the sense that the administration, or in this case the IRS, takes away their tax-exempt status. They throw a fit, go to the court, and lose.
The sequence is the same. And Professor Dershowitz said they're going to lose this case, and I think they're going to lose it. But I added on, and I may have repeated myself with this last week, but they sued on Monday. It was last week's story. It was going to play itself out in negotiations, and Harvard was going to get straight. They were going to actually toe the line. And I went back and I began to research. President Garber sent out this letter on March 31st to the university called Our Resolve, rather pompously titled Our Resolve. Yes. And they admitted all this anti-Semitism. But what wasn't admitted to, and I don't see much coverage of, they just lost in June of 2023 a Supreme Court case. They lost it 6-3. They've been violating the Equal Protection Clause in the Civil Rights Act of 1964 for years and years, to the detriment of Asian Americans. And the Supreme Court, I'm quoting from the Chief Justice here, the university's main response to these criticisms is essentially, trust us. Well, I don't trust him. Do you trust him, Byron, to get right?
No. As a matter of fact, on the anti-Semitism part, wasn't part of his letter saying that, we've stopped all that. We're really better. We're different now. I mean, we're different than we were, the day before yesterday. And we have stopped these practices. So we've made all these improvements. So there's no reason to keep pushing on us, IRS, please. I think that was. I think he kind of admitted some of this by saying that they'd stopped doing.
In the March 31st, our resolve letter, he says, we've been bad, but we're fixing it. But we acknowledge we have a long way to go, but we've been bad. And then the letter comes in from the Trump administration on Friday last. And then on Monday, a week ago from yesterday, Harvard says, go away, and they throw down. And then yesterday, they sue. And so I think they've just adopted a PR strategy that's intended to make people like you and me look away. And I don't think they're going to get victim status in the United States in 2025. Do you?
No. What do you make of these reports, by the way, that the Trump administration letter to Harvard was sent as, quote, by mistake?
My response to that was, I don't care, because it went out. And once it goes out, it's an official statement by the Department of Education and two other agencies, and Harvard rejected it. So whether or not it was done by they dotted their I's and crossed their T's, doesn't matter to me. It's a demand letter, and Harvard said, well, you know what Harvard said. They said, screw off.
Yeah. Well, they haven't retracted the letter or everything.
No.
I guess this was part of the PR battle. The administration basically writes a long, angry letter to its girlfriend and then accidentally hits send and goes, oh, damn, I didn't mean to do that. But it doesn't matter. The letter has been received, and it has not been retracted.
And we're going to talk during the break. The great thing about that letter is it was 5 pages long, but it laid out 6 persuasive things, and Harvard said no to them all. Byron, yesterday I had on the one and the only Arthur Brooks. I love Arthur Brooks. I think he's a national treasure. He's up at Harvard now, at Harvard Business School. Says, Hugh, you love the university, and I do. Said, and you know John Manning is their provost. I didn't know that, but John Manning is their provost. He had been the dean of their law school. He was in the Reagan Department of Justice. He was the Office of Legal Counsel. He was in the SG's office. He's a very smart lawyer. I just don't understand how anyone could give them this legal advice, or why we're referring to Robert Hur as a Trump-friendly lawyer simply because he didn't indict Joe Biden. Have you seen those stories?
Yes, I did see that. Well, I mean, Robert Hur was one of the co-authors of one of these "Don't Mess with Harvard" letters.
Yes,
he's a Harvard alum, and most of your listeners will know him as the special counsel who decided not to pursue Joe Biden for mishandling classified information, and then the process said that I believe Biden was an elderly man who
forgetful. Forgetful.
What was that again?
Forgetful, elderly old man.
Forgetful elderly man, and which was absolutely correct and kind of diplomatic. But Hur has been part of the sort of reflexive defense of Harvard. Just because he honestly portrayed Joe Biden doesn't mean he's going to be on your side or the other side of the Harvard matter.
He's on the side of $2,000 an hour, is on whose side he is. Who's ever going to hire King and Spalding is on whose side he is. He's a lawyer. But what I want to cut through the smoke, is anyone persuaded that Harvard hasn't done a bad thing here? I mean, does anyone believe that Harvard is being persecuted?
Well, to your first question, is anyone not persuaded by the idea that Harvard's done something bad? I think no. I think everybody kind of agrees about that, and I think that what's refreshing about the Trump letter, as is in a lot of this administration so far, is that they've come out and done stuff that people have talked about for a long time, and I'm sure you've complained about Harvard not just since October the 7th, but for a long time, and the Trump administration has actually done something about it.
Byron, I only go up every 5 years. I'm never invited, but I always go up every 5 years for a reunion, and it gets worse. I'm not going back. It just is so absolutely unhinged. Byron, I have one more question for you. I posed it to Brett Baer earlier. Harvard has gone off the rails. AOC raised $9.6 million. Chris Van Hollen is now the senator from El Salvador in MS-13. And California's fallen apart. Are the Democrat, Ro Khanna is on every, I like Ro comes on this program. Are they going left? Are they absolutely going to do the McGovern thing in 72?
Well, there is a big debate that we've been talking about inside the Democratic Party, and we know there are some centrists who are kind of looking back to the Democratic to the DLC back in Bill Clinton years and saying the party needs to move to the center and attract some of those voters it lost in 2024. But on the other hand, there are always people who say we lost because we didn't go far enough. We weren't far left enough. And there's a significant number of people inside the Democratic Party who believe that. And they have all the energy now because those are the people who are saying resist, resist, resist. Every single thing, every single day of the Trump administration, resist. And that is what gets you the MSNBC viewers and the small contributors. There's a lot of people out there who believe that and who want to support that. And they don't want to hear what Rui Teixeira has to say. They don't want to hear what James Carville has to say. They don't want to hear.
And David Hogg is pretty good at this talking head stuff.
David Hogg is the guy there.
And
So there is a newer generation. And this is a generational change too, by the way. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi is 83, 84 years old, and she's probably
rounding down there, Byron.
Yeah, but anyway, the interesting thing is when you think, well, they lost because they went left. There are always people who say we lost because we didn't go left far enough.
And I think those people, I call them the ascendant left. They're having their moment. Byron York on X. Follow him in the Washington Examiner every day. See him on Fox News. Thank you, Byron. Byron York on X. So happy to have me joined by Steve Hilton from Huntington Beach, California, where Steve declared for governor today. Hello, Steve. Welcome back to the program. Tell us why did you pick Huntington Beach, and why are you doing this crazy thing of running for governor in California?
Well, first of all, Hugh, it's so great to be with you on this very special day, the first day of 15 months before we can turn around 15 years of Democrat one-party rule in California. I chose Huntington Beach for a very, very specific reason. It captures the spirit that I think is going to take us to save California. Just over 4 years ago, this city, this iconic city in Orange County, was run by Democrats, 6-1 by Democrats. Then in 2022, a friend of mine, the co-chair of my campaign, Tony Strickland, put together a slate of candidates. They ran they called themselves the Fab Four, and they took control of the council. They immediately got to work implementing common sense conservative policies. They cleared homeless encampments. They prosecuted crime. They got the nonsense out of the school libraries. And then they were rewarded just now in November. This group, they expanded. They had a slate of 7. They called themselves the Magnificent 7. They won a clean sweep. So you've seen this city go from 6-1 Democrat to 7-0 Republican in 4 years. And the icing on the cake, just last week, Huntington Beach was rated the best run city in California. To me, that is an absolute representation of everything we really need to be doing to make California truly golden again, which is the theme of my campaign.
Now, Steve, I don't live in Huntington Beach, but I go down there every Saturday that I'm in California because it's the happiest place on the planet on Saturday morning. Everything in the world's going on, and old, slow guys like me don't get pushed aside by the youngsters. They take care not to knock you over. I love Huntington Beach. I also love California, but I left. I left because of the taxes. I left because of the cost of everything. Yes. I left because there was no hope for Republicans to get a foothold. Why do you think you can break the death grip of Democrats on the state?
Because it's got so bad. I've been on the road the last 2 years, Hugh, listening to people, meeting people, working on the policy ideas that are going to save California through my organization, Golden Together. I've been doing that for 2 years. People have had it up to here. The struggles that they have to just put food on the table. I mean, 1/3 of Californians, according to a recent survey, can't meet their basic needs. We've got the highest housing costs in the country, the highest taxes, highest price for gas, electricity, water, everything. You run a business, that's impossible, the unbelievable bureaucracy and so on. So people have really had enough. So I think they're really crying out for a high energy, positive, practical alternative. I think we've got the best shot in at least 20 years of really changing California, turning things around and beating this one-party Democrat rule that's been such a disaster.
Now, Steve Hilton, I campaigned for Arnold back in the day when he won the recall. Turned out, I love Arnold, but he got a glass jaw. He took one punch and he went down like tomato can. Chuck Wepner against Muhammad Ali. Are you that way? Will you punch it out with him if somehow miraculously you end up in the governor's mansion in Sacramento?
Oh my goodness, we've got to get the change happening. I mean, this is what I've been doing all my life, is being I've been very consistent and very clear about what I believe and what I want to get done. And right in the early days of the pandemic, I was the first person to start calling out the lockdowns, the school closures. I was called all sorts of names, but I stuck with it. And right back in my day, working in the government in the UK, I was senior advisor to Prime Minister David Cameron. That we had the same problem, that massive bureaucracy, sprawling regulations. I tried to get that done. The political will wasn't there, but I saw what it takes. So I'm absolutely determined to make the change happen. Look, the simple things we need to do to restore the California dream, a good job where you make enough to raise your family in a home of your own, in a safe neighborhood, with a good school so your kids have a better life than you. Great jobs, great homes, great kids. It's practical stuff. But to get it done, you've got to take on the bureaucracy, the administrative state in Sacramento, which is much worse, by the way, even than in Washington, because at least in Washington, you've had alternating Republican and Democrat administrations. Here in California, it's been a one-way street, left, left, left for so long. It's going to be really tough, but one way or another, I am determined to get it done. We will bring the change California needs. I'm not going to let
now,
any
Steve Hilton, before I ask the next question, I want to make sure we give your website for people to go and find you in your campaign. Where do people find Steve Hilton running for governor?
SteveHiltonforGovernor.com, Steve Hilton, FOR4Governor.com. Please get involved. We need to have the support. Look, this is going to be a grassroots movement. That's what we're trying to build. I've been on the road. I know the energy is there. We've got to get together. People got to talk to their friends and neighbors in their communities and believe that change is possible. We need money. You've got this massive Democrat machine. They got the unions' money. They've still got a bunch of the billionaires. We've got to put together a real effort now, the best shot we've had, as I say, in 20 years. So please support this campaign, SteveHiltonforGovernor.com.
Now I want to go back to education. I had dinner on Saturday night with good friends Bob and Toby. And Bob Waldorf is a great American. He went to UCLA in the 60s. It cost $600 a year. My wife went to UC Davis in the 70s. It cost $800 a year. And I think I'm rounding up in both cases. Those universities now don't cost Californians anything because their kids can't get into them. How are you going to fix public education? And that goes, by the way, for the state university system and the community college system, indeed for K through 12. It's all broken.
You're totally right. I mean, if you just look at K through 12, just start with that, right? You've got an absolutely catastrophic failure, right? So much money goes in. They get the public education system is guaranteed 38% of the budget, however the budget much it goes up. In the last 10 years, they've doubled the budget in the state of California. Even after inflation, it's gone up 50 years. They got all the money they need, but look at the results. You've got under a half of kids in public schools in California meet basic standards. 47% meet basic standards in English. It's just 33% in math. Those numbers should be 100%. We've got to we've got to reward teachers that are doing a good job, but we've got to remove the ones that aren't. So we need much more transparency. That's why I'm talking about a grade for every school, a grade for every teacher, so we can really focus on raising those standards. We've got to have that clarity about focusing on the actual academics, not this ridiculous ideological indoctrination. The governor controls the State Board of Education. They've been driving the curriculum. This latest thing they're doing is this ethnic studies curriculum that's going to be compulsory for every student in California, even as they don't know how to read properly or do math properly. The governor can change that directly. Then you look at the UC system and look at universities. I mean, just the enormous amount of administrative bloat instead of actually making it possible for students to go to those universities and climb the ladder of opportunity. It was a big theme of my speech today, the ladder of opportunity. Every rung on that ladder has been smashed by Democrats. The economic security, a home of your own, a good education, everything that we think of as the California dream, it's been smashed. We need to get back to that.
All right, Steve, let's wrap up by making sure people hear the website. And again, you're going to be up against the California teachers, maybe the tribes, certainly the prison guards. You're going to be hit by an avalanche of money overwhelming you from the left. So people have to chip in small amounts if they're going to get you anywhere.
Exactly.
How much do you think you have to raise, and is it easy to donate at your website?
Well, I mean, the people, yes, please go to stevehiltonforgovernor.com. But what we're hearing is that we need a minimum of $40 million, maybe $100 million. They'll have even more than that because of, and remember, the union money that they have, that's our money. It's taxpayer money because it's public sector workers through the dues that actually the Supreme Court ruling said they weren't allowed to collect compulsorily, but they're blocking people from even stopping the dues going to them. So the whole thing is corrupt. It's the Democrat industrial complex. They got a ton of money. We need to fight back. stevehiltonforgovernor.com.
Last question. There is no media left. I mean, there's my show, there's Larry Elder, you got KRLA in the morning, KCBQ. You're on right now across the entire state of California and the country. But the Times is a shadow of itself. How do you get people, how do you communicate with people in this era?
Well, the great thing now is that we've got all this explosion of independent media. So we've got podcasts, we've got social media. We live streamed our event today, so you've got people watching. There's a real opportunity now to get the message out beyond those gatekeepers. It's wonderful to be with you, Hugh, and you and your colleagues. I think we've built this amazing ecosystem of independent media, and that's going to be a big, big part of this movement.
SteveHiltonForGovernor.com, and you can follow Steve on X at Steve Hilton X. First time we've ever had an Oxford New College man run for governor in California. It would be wonderful if he wins. I might even move back. Not committing to anything.
That's my goal. That's why I'm doing this.
If you win, it's possible. But I ain't coming back if you don't, that's for sure. And you're up against Katie Porter and Becerra and maybe Kamala. I mean, you've got like 20 Democrats to go against. We'll keep talking, Steve Hilton. God bless your efforts. Steve Hilton X on X, Steve Hilton X, or go to SteveHiltonForGovernor.com. Long time ago, I clerked on the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit for a guy named George McKinnon. And one of his cases was the aftermath of the breakup of Ma Bell. And it was a nightmare. The briefs stretched to the ceiling about access fees, et cetera. Point being, Ma Bell really was a monopoly, and it really did have to be broken up. But it was a mess. It was a nightmare. Now there's another such case underway, the FTC versus Meta, as in Facebook, Instagram, et cetera. And I thought I would talk to a non-lawyer who knows Meta well. I think he works for Meta occasionally, Alex Gray, who used to be the chief of staff at the National Security Council. Alex, I'm not a big fan of American antitrust suits being brought against American companies for which there are obvious competitors. I mean, it's obviously a competitive area. What is the FTC's theory of the case here, and what is Meta's pushback?
Well, Hugh, only speaking for myself as someone who's observed this from the national security angle, I think I'd make a couple of points. I mean, one is President Trump has been very clear that he views American tech companies as American national champions who have a real role to play from a national security standpoint in innovating at the cutting edge and representing the United States globally in our competition with China. I think it's somewhat absurd for Republican members of the FTC to take the Lena Khan Biden FTC position, which is totally at odds with President Trump's advocacy for American tech. I mean, you remember the Vice President Vance's speech at the AI summit in Paris, where he was making this incredibly eloquent case for American AI dominance on the world stage. That is totally at odds with what's being done by the FTC toward Meta. And I think the president, frankly, if he were following this, and he's got a lot on his plate, I think he would be outraged that the FTC, chaired by one of his own appointees, is doing something to hamstring his own agenda.
Well, the problem with administrative agency momentum is once it gets going in a particular direction, it's very hard to stop it, much less turn it around. And so it would require actually a presidential directive to the FTC, which is well within his authority to do. It's all Article 2. It's allegedly an independent agency, but that doesn't mean it's not part of the unitary executive. But how did it get this far? I mean, what do they want out of Meta?
Well, the best I can tell is there has been a determination, and look, frankly, Hugh, let's go back to a little bit to the Lena Khan FTC under Joe Biden, where the European Union was actually working directly with American antitrust agencies to go after American tech companies. And I don't know if that's still going on, but it's that type of antagonism. You mentioned the Ma Bell example. As a non-lawyer, I don't pretend to get into the what type of antitrust, the welfare standard and all of this. But what I will say is our large U.S. tech companies are at the forefront of American innovation. And I think it would be foolhardy. I come at this as a national security professional. I think it would be foolhardy for us to take the places that are churning out the most innovative American tech platforms and AI models, especially when you have China putting DeepSeek forward, you have China innovating in rapid pace in quantum computing. I think it would be the height of recklessness for a Republican administration to allow its regulatory agencies to tear up that hub of American tech innovation. I think that would be totally contrary.
I want to echo that, because Lena Khan, I want to make sure the Steelers fans who are listening understand this. Lena Khan dropped in via parachute from Yale Law School, where she had written a "We Must Kill Amazon" article, into the FTC, where Joe Biden made her chair. And she began to pursue the most aggressive left-wing agenda against American companies using outdated, outmoded laws that were really driven by railroads and other concentrations of the wealthy oil industry in the early part of the last century and maybe even the century before. They're completely inapplicable to big tech in Silicon Valley. Now, if Congress wants to legislate and give the FTC direction, great. But the whole Chevron doctrine, the reason we were jumping up and down when it got tossed out, is it was supposed to cabin agencies from doing this. Have you had a chance to talk to anyone at the FTC about the zeal with which they're going after American companies?
I have not. And, frankly, what concerns me a lot more than whether I have, Hugh, is that I don't think anyone at the FTC is talking to the folks in J.D. Vance's office. I don't think they're talking to people like Michael Kratsius at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, who are spending their days trying to come up with innovative policies so that we are the tech leader for the next century. And this is basically, it's one part of the administration, the regulatory arm that's just on autopilot with Lena Khan holdovers, doing one set of policies that's shooting in the foot the other part of the administration that's pursuing innovative and forward-leaning policies. And frankly, the winner here, in my opinion, Hugh, is Beijing. And that is the fundamental.
I can't prove it. I won't be able to prove it. But the Chinese Communist Party, if a breakup is ordered, that's the end game for Lena Khan-ites. If they order a breakup, some CCP front will get a hold of part of Meta. I mean, don't you think they'll try, Alex? You know the CCP.
Well, the CCP will try. And frankly, even if they didn't, at the Chinese state-owned enterprises that are working on this in Chinese government-run campuses that are doing quantum, that are doing AI, that are doing all sorts of cutting-edge work, they're going to be the winners. They don't have to worry about being broken up. No one's trying to break up the Chinese SOE monopolies. So we're just handing them a victory on a silver platter.
Yeah, the opportunity cost of this for Meta and for Google, which is also being sued, and I'm no fan of the politics of a lot of the people that work at these companies, but I don't understand shackling ourselves with hyper ideology of the left. So last question, Alex. Do you go to the court? Have you ever actually been in an antitrust? It's the most boring day you'll ever spend if you actually have to go to the court.
I've never done it. It is not on my bucket list, Hugh.
Good. Don't do it. I'm just here to warn you. You're my friend. You and Ambassador O'Brien are my friends. Never go near an antitrust proceeding. You won't get out awake. Alex Gray, great to talk to you from American Global Strategies. I do think it's just amazing to me that Team Trump arrives and the first thing they do is try and break up Meta. It just is so astonishingly stupid. Coming up after the break, James Lilacs will be here. He is the host of Dining to Go, a food truck podcast, which I think you'll find very interesting. Don't miss Lilacs coming up. I do want to play for you. I got to tell you about Consumer Cellular, not because of it's an ad, but because of a question.
But first, I want to play for you Pam Bondi, the Attorney General today. I love these task forces. Cut number 7.
We're excited to be here for the launch of the task force to eradicate anti-Christian bias as outlined in the President's executive order. Joining me today are members of the task force and individuals who have been impacted by the anti-Christian bias. Together, this task force will identify any unlawful anti-Christian policies, practices, or conduct across the government, seek input from the faith-based organizations and state governments to end anti-Christian bias, find and fix deficiencies in existing and regulatory practices that might contribute to the anti-Christian bias. As President Trump has stated, the Biden administration engaged in an egregious pattern of targeting peaceful Christians while ignoring violent anti-Christian offenses. The president is right. Biden's Department of Justice abused and targeted Christians. Pro-life Christians were arrested and imprisoned for peacefully praying outside abortion clinics. The FBI spied on traditional Catholics in their parishes. President Biden declared Easter Sunday to be Transgender Day of Visibility. No longer.
All right. I love Pam Bondi. I think the Attorney General, or General Bondi, as we would say if we are a DOJ alum like I am, is fabulous at her job. If you were watching that on the Salem News Channel, the thing you will notice, however, is that wherever they're holding it, the help doesn't know that she's on. They're in a restaurant, I think, or a ballroom. Run that video again, Harley. They got waiters going back and forth like ducks on a shooting platform at a carnival. And the guy is serving coffee. She's talking, right? She's the U.S. Attorney General. She's talking. And the wait staff is like going up and down the aisle. Now, I'm used to speaking to groups where dinner continues. You get up in the front, you talk over a little, people bring out their cookies and their cream. That's fine. But the Attorney General of the United States is trying to make a major public. Don't move around behind her. It's like Optics 101. Now I want to talk to you about Cellular Service 101. And I'm doing this because I got Steelers fans who listen to this show, and they get confused. And I tell them you get 2 lines for $60 unlimited data. And they say, I don't need 2 lines. And, okay, you don't have to get 2 lines. And you don't have to get unlimited data with Consumer Cellular. You can get whatever you want. Whatever you get with them is going to be cheaper than what you're getting with Big Cellular. That's my bottom line. All right? Savings without sacrifice. Pick up the phone and call 1-800-411-4454. Tell them what your demo is, and then have a conversation. By the way, you'll get to them very quickly. You'll hit a couple of buttons. They'll say, are you calling from A, B, or C? And one button. Right? It's not like 18 screens. If any of you have tried to refill a prescription at a pharmacy, you realize it's the marathon of buttons. And you just, get yourself a cup of coffee, roast some popcorn, sit down, and eventually you'll get to, I'd like to refill this prescription. But that's not Consumer Cellular. It's one touch, you get to a person. That person is in the United States. That person is going to find out from you what age you are. Now, remember, their target demo is 50 plus, because they got a deal for you. If you're over 50 years old, they have a 8 gig deal. And 8 gigs, okay, what is that? Steeler fans I don't have a gig. Well, gigs are a capacity. It's an amount of information that you use. And that's all you need to know. If you have a phone, you're using gigs. And maybe you don't use many gigs. Maybe you just check Bleacher Report. You're a Steelers fan, so you probably did not check the scoreboard much last year. You're a Pirates fan, you never look up. But if you are over 50, chances are you don't need unlimited data. But if you do, and you've got a husband and wife, you got 2 phones, 2 lines for $60 a month. Second month free if you use my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H. But what I want to emphasize, even if you don't use my name, Consumer Cellular saves you money. And when you are saved money because of something you heard on my show, you like me and you come back. And I did get a phone from Consumer Cellular. You can switch, by the way. It's very, very easy.
Keep the number, keep your data. They can do all that for you. 20 minutes tops. Call them up. Just check. You probably don't even know. Dwayne doesn't know how much he's paying for his phone. Don't be Dwayne. Be Hugh. Check out Consumer Cellular at consumercellular.com/Hugh, 1-800-411-4454. Joined by Lilacs, as in lilacs.com, where you will find the food truck blog to kill all food truck blogs. Dining to Go with James Lilac. James, how many food trucks are there in the Twin Cities?
Pre-pandemic, there would be about 15, I swear, lined up inside of our building. Now, in these days, they seem to have dwindled down to a number approximating 0. But, when the weather comes and it's warmer, you may find 4, and it's great. You can get hot Indian food. You can get everything but good English food, and I regret that. There are some days I go to the office, I'd love a good English proper breakfast, bangers, mash, beans, all the rest of it. Not even the kind of bacon they have. They call our bacon streaky bacon.
Now, look, you said when it gets warm, so you're referring to August. What about the rest of the year in Minnesota? Do the food trucks go indoors?
Yes, Hugh, that's what they do. We have a very big building where all the food trucks go, and then people go in the building and pretend they're outside. No, they don't. We don't see them. They go
I thought maybe it was the
They're
Star Tribune building. I thought it was what that.
No.
I was setting you up for that. James, I want to know your thought. I really do want to know your thoughts on Harvard suing the federal government because they're entitled to their $9 billion.
Well, yes. From what I understand, and I may be wrong because what do I know? Harvard's got a lot of money, but it's not the sort of thing where you can kind of go down to the bank and get it out. So they want to keep that sweet, sweet federal money coming as often as possible. Some of it, it's not as if we're just giving it to them for the sake of giving it to them. Sometimes they have to provide a service or research or do stuff like that. But the idea that they are somehow entitled to get it and that it is a violation of their right, I would like to take that argument up for myself personally. And since I educate so many people on my blog about many things, including, of course, food trucks, never, I think that I should be entitled to receive a certain stipend as well to continue the good work that I do. It's absurd, but it's...
you've given me an idea. If we got together the old crowd, Ed Morrissey, get him up from Texas, Hinderacker and Scott Johnson,
Northern Alliance.
Go get Mitch. You guys could run a heck of a food truck. Go get the Fratters guys. What do you think you would sell?
Yeah, I thought you were going that we could have some sort of educational institution that would enlighten people about things and electoral choices in Minnesota. No. Food truck. Well, I would go for strictly local varieties because when you walk outside, there's Thai, there's Indian, there's Spanish, there's Mexican, there's Spanish, and all these things. But where's the lutefisk? Where's the fish that's been stuffed with cod and lye and buried in the cold, hard ground for 6 months until it turns into an inedible gelatinal mass? Where's the lutefisk? Where's the...
All right, let's get to the news. Breaking news. We always do hard news on the Lilac segment. From Minnesota, Hennepin County, my favorite named county other than Ashtabula County in the United States. Hennepin County Police Department finds a guy who's been scratching up Teslas. He's really done a number on a bunch of Teslas. They have the evidence. They throw the book at him. And Hennepin County doesn't prosecute. Why does it?
$20,000 worth of damage.
$20,000 worth of damage. Why aren't they prosecuting him?
Because a plea deal was struck, I'm guessing, and some sort. They put him into diversion. And diversion is the sort of nice word for when somebody doesn't actually go to the slammer, but does things for the community and they're under probation. Because it would be mean and cruel to burden the guy and make him justice system involved, I suppose, and make him work it off. That's what we. Even if he doesn't work it off, the idea somehow of somebody breaking rocks because they had a spasm of anti-Musk activity that flooded all the circuits and overrode their rationality and they couldn't help themselves but to carve a swastika in a vehicle. It would be mean. Would we all be better if he were in an orange jumpsuit? Orange might not even be his color. So no, the kind thing to do is to say...
Do you guys believe in deterrence anymore? Because I know you have Soros prosecutors. I know Amy Klobuchar is your senator. And by the way, is Tim Walz your governor?
Tim Walz is our governor, yes.
And is Ilhan Omar your congresswoman?
Yes, indeed. And I believe that the guy who scratched the Teslas worked for the state government as well.
Yes, I'm told that that's true. So, do you not believe in deterrence, or is this actually a thing? I think I saw the police department involved is actually angry with the prosecutor.
Oh, I mean, of course they are. Yeah, absolutely so. There's a great anger here in Minneapolis, even among some people of a liberal disposition who regard the Mary Moriarty as being entirely too soft on crime. And we'll see what happens when she comes up for election next time. Should have been no surprise to anybody who's followed her career. But yes, there is. People are tired of having the quality of life in the city upbraided by a criminal class that doesn't seem to be particularly worried about getting caught or the rest of it. Traffic being one example. Since 2020, the traffic in the city has gone from just sort of generally your urban traffic to people just blasting through stop signs with no with no intent of stopping whatsoever because they know they're not going to get pulled over. So yeah, there's that. We may be behind the curve in getting sick and tired of it, but the people are getting increasingly tired and or sick or both.
Has hooliganism invaded the fair?
Yes. The last couple of years, there's always some zesty interlude late at night, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, people hopping over the fence or people having a beef in the midway or something, and the rest of it. It's not new, but every year, yes, we do, alas, hear of fights that inevitably spill into the streets and the cops are called. It's still safe. Don't get me wrong. The idea that Minneapolis is a flaming dystopia is wrong. It just isn't. It's so much better than it was 4 years ago. But there are still these incremental little degradations of life.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, the very fact that the traffic, as I mentioned before, the fact that antisocial behavior that used to be, the cops had a variety of arrows in their quiver where they could stop somebody for loitering or that's been removed because of disparate impact. So you have in some parts of downtown a rather vibrant street life, shall we say. But then again, I'm downtown every day. I walk downtown from my car to my building without fear. I never see anything. I'm happy. I'm never worried. And the other day, somebody was shot dead in his car 2 hours after I'd left. So, it is.
Oh,
it is.
That's bad for the food truck business.
Well, yes, that may be why we're down to 0 this week. But the food trucks usually leave by 2, and most of the fun happens probably when the sun starts to go down. And
I used to love downtown. I would stay in the big, giant, empty Hilton downtown in Minneapolis.
Yep.
Because if you go to a conference in the winter, there's nobody there, so the rooms are cheap. But I was always felt safe in Minneapolis. We have 30 seconds. Has that changed?
It did for a while. It's better now. There's no reason to fear. I've never felt unnerved. But then again, I'm not down in some parts of the entertainment district at 1 o'clock in the morning when everything's emptying out. And people
are sure you are. You're just trying to. You're trying to hide from it. Go find out the truth at lilacs.com. See what he has to say about the food truck of the week at lilacs.com and the diner.
Dwayne's World
at Substack.
You ought to go on every podcast in America twice. And Dwayne's World is a great long-form podcast. You got talent today, Dwayne?
Yeah, Jim Talent's going to be on today.
Jim Talent. So Dwayne's World will drop on...
It'll drop tomorrow.
Which would be Wednesday.
Yes.
And did you know that the Guardians beat the Yankees last night?
That's always a good day.
Well,
if Guy Benson is listening, we beat the Yankees last night.
Any day, either Boston or the Yankees lose is a good day.
That's right. So there is a national movement in America that Steve Hilton could capitalize on. If you're just anti-Yankee, anti-Red Sox, anti-Steelers, you can get elected president in this country.
Yes.
I think pretty much.
I believe so.
So I wanted to close by telling people Dwayne's World is a great podcast. I have my own podcast, Highly Concentrated Hugh. We would like you to like and subscribe to those podcasts. Mine is almost daily. What do I mean by that? It's 5 times a week, but I stagger one so you have something to listen to on Saturday morning. I also have a magnificent YouTube channel. And my magnificent YouTube channel takes the wonderful video from the Hugh Hewitt show on the Salem News Channel, clips it, and Harley throws it up there and just picks 2 or 3 things. And if you subscribe, you might miss something on the show, but you won't miss the most important part of the show. Today, I think it's the Steve Hilton interview. He's a lot of fun. Now, Californians don't like fun. They like taxes. And Californians don't like safety. They prefer lawlessness. And California doesn't like highway improvement projects that ever get finished. In fact, I don't think the 55's ever been finished.
I'll tell you what. You know what I do like about Hilton? He's got energy.
Oh, yeah, got a lot of energy.
And you know what? We have not had that.
Happy energy.
Right.
Happy energy. Huntington Beach energy.
Yeah.
And Huntington Beach is a little bit unusual. As I tell you, that's why I go down there on the Saturdays that I can. I'm not going to miss California that much because we've actually had 3 nice days this year that I've been teaching. But the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt, who's the advanced landing team at Studio Beltway, just sent me a text. It's 87 degrees there in muggy.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, I honestly, take a knife if you're going to cut your way into your house through the Beltway at 87 degrees. And it's, is it still April?
It is still April.
It is still April. See, that should be illegal. I don't know what Jefferson put over on Hamilton, but when they did The Room Where It Happened, that is a song, in fact, from the Hamilton musical, for those of you who are Steelers fans. The Room Where It Happened, Hamilton got a bank that went out of business. Virginia got the District of Columbia and the swamp. So I think Jefferson basically took Hamilton to the cleaners, and we're all paying the ticket. I'll be back tomorrow, America. In the meantime, head over to my YouTube channel, subscribe and like it, please. I'd like to get the plaque eventually. And follow me on X, follow Dwayne's World.